Meanwhile, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma has told the BRICS youth delegates that all leaders invited to next month's summit should be treated well. The Kremlin is yet to confirm if Putin will attend physically.
As far as I know, all the BRICS countries and their leaders have been invited to South Africa. If you invite someone in your home, you want to treat them well.
For more on this, let's speak to Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection foreign policy analyst Na'eem Jeenah. Very good evening to you, Na'eem. Good to speak to you as always. So the issue of Vladimir Putin, whether he is going to come to South Africa in August or not, dominating even this gathering of BRICS political parties, should it be the main talking point?
Well, it shouldn't be the main talking point. I don't think it'll be the main talking point of this meeting, but it certainly will be hovering over the entire meeting. South Africa is definitely in a very tight spot with regards to this. If he does arrive, then South Africa is under obligation to arrest him. If he doesn't arrive, the Russians wouldn't be too pleased about South Africa snubbing them. So as Deputy President said a few days ago, South Africa is considering three options that they've proposed to other BRICS members, none of which is being accepted by all members at the moment.
And would giving up the rights to host the summit be the easiest out, if you will, for South Africa?
Passing it on to another member state, yes, and most likely that would be China. That would be the easiest way out for South Africa. They wouldn't have to then host Putin on our soil and therefore risk being accused of going against their obligations. And you know, it'll all be very smooth. That will be the easiest one. The other two options, I mean, one is that it be a virtual meeting. I don't think that other BRICS members are going to settle for that. And the third option, that Putin doesn't attend but his foreign minister attends instead, is certainly not going to fly with the Russians. So the best option probably is that of moving to China. For the Russians, of course, you know, Putin's since Russian troops went into Ukraine, Putin has been to China. He hasn't been anywhere in the rest of the world. And so coming to South Africa on the African continent would be for him a big feather in his cap, and that's why they don't really want to have it moved to China.
Is it really, though, Russia's call to make? Is it Putin's call to make ultimately as to whether he travels to South Africa or not in August?
Well, in a sense, yes. I mean, there's 5 equal members, supposedly equal members of BRICS, and it's a summit for heads of states, and therefore he has been invited as the head of state. He makes the decision about whether he comes or not. South Africa could say, we don't want you to come, don't come, but then that would be a big slap in the face for the Russians. It would be a diplomatic issue between the two countries, and I don't think South Africa wants to risk that, number one, because of relations with Russia, number two, because if there's any chance that this African peace effort is to produce anything, you have to maintain good relations with both parties, and in this case, particularly, you can't upset the Russians.
And then if South Africa did indeed cede, shall we say, the rights to host the summit in August and let China, for instance, go ahead with the hosting, would that compromise or do a disservice to Pretoria's standing within the BRICS formation?
I don't think so. I think the other BRICS members understand the difficult position that South Africa is in, understand how our legal system works and how our constitution works, etc. I mean, we are not China, we are not India even. So yeah, I think there'll be understanding, and probably South Africa will then ask to host the next one when, you know, things have cooled with regards to other heads of state.
And Na'eem, let's put in context here for our viewers why it is that South Africa very much wants to host this BRICS summit, because BRICS is an organization made up of many bigger countries, when you look at just the main examples of Russia and China, and this country wants to go ahead in August and host the summit. I remember President Ramaphosa speaking at an ANC event earlier this month at a provincial elective conference saying the summit will go ahead in South Africa. Let's put in context why it is such an important gathering to be held here?
Well, partly because of what you said. South Africa is the smallest member of BRICS. I mean, in terms of its economy, the largest being China, of course. South Africa doesn't really compare. In terms of population, look at India, look at China, even Brazil. South Africa doesn't compare. So for one thing, it's greatly prestigious for South Africa to host the summit and host all of these heads of state. And it's not only 4 other heads of states. As you know, in previous summits, many other heads of states have been invited as guests as well. So it's that kind of prestige and saying that we are a full and equal member of BRICS, as everyone else is, all the bigger guys are. But the other issue is that this summit, it seems, is going to deliberate on whether to accept new members, to expand into a kind of BRICS Plus outfit. We've been told that there have been 19 new applications. We know some of the names, some of the countries. And if that is the case, and it seems likely that that's what's going to happen, that is going to be considered, these additional applications, then this would be a summit that is game-changing, firstly for BRICS, and in terms of how BRICS moves forward, but frankly, game-changing for global geopolitics. Because if you have a block of 20 or 25 countries that are saying, most of which are saying we are non-aligned, others are saying that we don't want to take sides, clearly kind of not in the Western camp. Although I say that with some reservation, because India, for example, is in the Western camp. But if you have such a new bloc being launched in South Africa, that kind of prestige increases even more. And if the movement thereafter is towards, for example, what Mashatile called for today, and South Africa has been calling for decades, which is reform of the UN Security Council, you can imagine that South Africa will it's not just the prestige, but it'll have this backing of this big bloc to say, yes, we can apply for this UN Security Council seat. So I think this particular summit is extremely important, and the symbolism of it being held in South Africa is very important. But right now, I think South Africa will sacrifice the symbolism for pragmatism.
And as you rightly say, the call today by the President of the ANC, Deputy President, I should say, Paul Mashatile, around reform of the United Nations Security Council is not a new one. What Africa wants to see basically is a permanent seat, am I right, for the continent, right, within the Security Council. But I wonder how much support that would have, especially from the West, when you consider how skeptical the West is of where the continent stands on the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Frankly, that proposal for that kind of reform of the UN Security Council, none of the 5 permanent members are very enthusiastic, and that includes China and Russia. They have not been very enthusiastic about it thus far. Of course, some countries continue banging on the issue, which is the correct thing to do. And again, if you have a new BRICS or BRICS Plus coming out of this summit or move, in the next couple of years, the global balance of power could change in such a way that particularly countries of the global south, even if you exclude China and Russia, the other countries together form a big enough bloc that they can start to impose their ideas somewhat.
Right.
If such a new bloc also means a lessening of the power of the West, then there's even more chance that such reform could take place in the Security Council.
Realistically, could that happen on the power or on the strength of African countries alone, when you consider that, I mean, the AU is an organization of more than 50 African states, yet and still when it proposes some of these things, there is still resistance and almost a swatting away, if you will, from the side of Western countries. When you look at the African nations that want to join BRICS, for example, or at least those who've been reported on, you've got countries such as Egypt, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Algeria, Nigeria, Sudan, and Tunisia. So would they realistically have enough might to bring about any kind of shift at UN level without Western backing?
Well, the call for UN reform is a continental one. It's not just these countries, it's the AU as a whole. But even the AU as a whole doesn't have enough clout to be able to make that happen. You can only make that happen if you are able to convince permanent members to go along with it. And having a BRICS Plus, where you have a number of African and other global South countries, can allow, for the sake of Russia's domestic policies and its policies in the region, and China's battle with the United States, they could more easily then be convinced to support such reform. And once you have two on your side, it makes the battle easier. So no, not Africa alone, but it needs to be a battle that is fought by various countries of the global South. If you have Brazil and India, for example, two big countries, but also Venezuela, other South American countries, other Asian countries, then it becomes something that can gain momentum.
Na'eem Jeenah, good to speak to you as always. Na'eem is with the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, a foreign policy